welcome to the first webinar of the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity webinar series, and welcome to all of our online viewers. I'm Daniela Carnovale. I'm from Plant Health Australia and the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network. And today I'm going to be your webinar host, and I'll also be doing a bit of a presentation about the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network and the webinar series. So a little bit about the webinar series. So the webinar series is being coordinated by the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network. This network is coordinated by Plant Health Australia with support from expert collaborators. The project is funded by the Australian Government's Agricultural Competitiveness White Paper, the government's plan for stronger farmers and a stronger economy. Today's talks will be one by myself, which is a welcome to the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network and the webinar series. I am one of the project officers here at Plant Health Australia, and I am just one of the members of the project team. The second talk today will be presented by Stephen Dibley, who's the Deputy Chief Plant Health Officer at Agriculture Victoria. And we're really lucky to be having him present today and sharing some of his time with us. Stephen will talk a little bit about biosecurity in Australia and give a bit of a Victorian example. So before we get going, just to run through some webinar housekeeping. Today, all of our online attendees will be on mute. However, we really encourage you to use the chat box function to ask any questions. So you can ask questions to individual panelists. So today online, we have the project team as panelists, or you can ask questions to the extended attendees. We'll be hopefully answering these questions throughout the webinar, but any unanswered questions will be addressed after the webinar, and answers will be distributed to all attendees then. This webinar is being recorded, so it will be available through our Botanic Gardens Biosecurity website, and we can also distribute the link to all attendees after the webinar. So with that, let's get straight into the first talk. So welcome to the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network and the webinar series. In this talk today, I will be highlighting why biosecurity is important in botanic gardens and bring to attention some activities and projects that are occurring both globally and within Australia. I'll provide a brief introduction to the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network and other related networks, and give a bit of a brief overview of the overall seminar series. So you all may be wondering why we are so interested in biosecurity within botanic gardens. So plant pests and diseases, in particular introduced plant pests and diseases, present a significant risk to plant health in the environment, agricultural systems, and in particular, botanic gardens. So botanic gardens present a risk as well as an opportunity to fight against the international spread of plant pests and diseases. The gardens are visited by millions of people each year. Gardens are often one of the first places that international visitors come, and this may result in them exotic pests entering on clothing and footwear of visitors. Due to this risk, botanic gardens can provide an opportunity to detect pests early. Further to this, the living plant collections found in botanic gardens and arboretum are a unique resource that can provide vital information regarding plant health. These botanic gardens hold a range of native flora and exotic species from all over the world, and this includes relatives of commercial crop species. Non-native species in botanic gardens can provide an insight on potential pests that may not be present in the plant's native country or area. Now, plants used this way are known as sentinels. The International Plant Sentinel Network has been developed recognising the value of these sentinel plants. The network links botanic gardens, arboreta, plant protection organisations and plant health scientists around the world to provide an early warning system of new and emerging plant pests, diseases and risks. Several gardens and arboretums in Australia have signed up to the IPSN, and they've done this as a way to develop methodologies for monitoring damaging plant pests and pathogens in gardens, provide training to increase capacity, facilitate access to diagnostic support, and build connections between the network, members of Botanic Gardens and arboreta. In addition to this global network, there's also a great deal of work being conducted here in Australia. So why are we targeting botanic gardens here in Australia? We recognise that staff and volunteers of botanic gardens can quickly and accurately recognise, monitor and record changes in plant health. These staff and volunteers are typically knowledgeable and passionate people who, with training and awareness, can become additional eyes and ears for the first detection of plant pests and diseases. Recognising these valuable resources, with coordination and support from Plant Health Australia, the knowledge, experience and passion of both Botanic Garden staff and the friends, guides and other volunteers are being harnessed in two new biosecurity networks. One network brings together staff to undertake a coordinated surveillance, while the other network seeks to draw on friends and guides who support the gardens. And this network is called the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network. So some of the activities that both of these networks have conducted so far include some hands-on training in surveillance with friends and staff, some awareness materials such as pest brochures, and we also can't forget this webinar series, which is brought to you by the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network. So what is the aim of the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network? So the network provides practical information and advice to staff of botanic gardens, community interest groups and members of the public in order to develop awareness, knowledge and skills to contribute to general biosecurity surveillance activities. And it's through building this capacity that the network aims to contribute to Australia's national plant health surveillance system and to post-border plant pest preparedness, early detection and response capability. And all of this will hopefully be discussed a little bit later in Steve's talk. We are trying to achieve many of these through various digital platforms. So you can follow us on Facebook, and you can also visit our website to gain valuable information on biosecurity and surveillance. So in combination to our network, there are two other networks that have been established through funding from the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. These networks have been established to explore the potential greater community involvement in the national biosecurity system. These networks include the Peri-urban Environmental Biosecurity Network and the Urban Plant Health Network. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a background to each of these networks, and as each of these networks will be presenting a webinar within these webinar series. So the Urban Plant Health Network connects urban and community gardeners across Greater Melbourne with industry and government experts. The Urban Plant Health Network shares information and knowledge about exotic plant pests and diseases, including where to find them, how to manage them, who to contact if you see them. And once again, you can follow them on their Facebook page. They also have a Twitter account, and you can also follow them on their website. The Peri-urban Environmental Biosecurity Network connects New South Wales communities with experts who can help develop knowledge and skills in identifying and reporting exotic pests and diseases within our natural landscapes. By building capacity and improving community awareness, the network aims to increase participation in general surveillance of environmental biosecurity risks. And they'll help protect the natural landscape from the impacts of exotic pests and diseases. And once again, they also have a Facebook page and a website that you can follow along. So in addition to all this activity surrounding botanic gardens, surveillance and biosecurity, this year is the International Year of Plant Health. The theme of this year is protecting plants, protecting life, because plants impact our lives every day. This year is a great opportunity to highlight the role everyone plays in protecting our plants from the threat of pests and diseases. And that's one of the things we're trying to achieve with the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network. Now on to the webinar series. So the Botanic Gardens webinar series, once again, is coordinated by the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network. It is a series of 8 webinars that's on every second Wednesday at 2 p.m. We have a fantastic lineup of presenters from a range of organisations, and the presenters will provide information relating to biosecurity and surveillance in botanic gardens, as well as in urban and peri-urban environments. So we have quite a full schedule already. And in 2 weeks' time, we will be joined by Louise Rossiter, who is the leader in plant pest surveillance at the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries. And she'll be giving a bit of a rundown on what plant pest surveillance is and why it's important. Other presenters will include a walkthrough of the biosecurity activities and plant pests of a few botanic gardens within Australia. And this includes a presentation from Brett Sumrall from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney. So we would really love for you to join in to these future webinars. To keep up to date on the webinar series, please follow our Facebook page and also check out our website. So now that you know a little bit about why biosecurity is important within Botanic Gardens, I'm now going to hand over to Stephen Dibley from Agriculture Victoria to give a bit of an introduction onto biosecurity.
So yeah, thanks Daniela. As said, my name's Stephen Dibley. I'm the Deputy Chief Plant Health Officer from Victoria. A little bit of context, Agriculture Victoria sits within the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions, and we're the department from the State Government of Victoria that's responsible for delivering of all biosecurity activities. And the Chief Plant Health Officer unit is the lead policy for plant biosecurity from Agriculture Victoria. So Daniela's got me here to just to give you an overview of biosecurity and plant biosecurity, what it looks like, what it means, and a little bit of context for what it looks like from a Victorian point of view. So in a nutshell and a very high level, plant biosecurity or biosecurity is a protection of the economy, environment and humans from the negative impacts associated with the establishment of new and exotic pests. Now, this definition is one of about 100 different definitions for plant biosecurity. All of them are about the same. In essence, though, biosecurity or plant biosecurity, in my view, is about actions that are taken by anybody in Australia to protect either our amenity and human health, our environment, or our plant production industries. So the sort of examples of things we're trying to protect I've got here in the pictures, things like red imported fire ant, which is something that's currently present in Queensland, but it impacts on plants and on human health and amenity. There's a lot of different pests out there that we haven't got in Australia, such as sudden oak death, which is the middle picture here, which impacts on large amounts of forests and would impact on botanic gardens and more broadly in the community. And there's a whole range of other pests out there that impact primarily on either backyards, communities, or our plant production industries. And the example I've got put up here is Xylella fastidiosa. On the right-hand side, this is a bacterium that's spread across the world, and at the moment currently going through Europe and in Italy particularly, and wiping out large numbers of olive trees. Particularly the sudden oak death and Xylella are things that we haven't got in Australia, and everything that we do in a biosecurity space is about keeping them out, reducing our risk, and if they do come in, limiting that impact. And so that's what sort of biosecurity is in a holistic sense. And everything I'm going to talk about today in a nutshell is about how we actually go about producing and acting on that. So the biosecurity system is probably a lot bigger than most people are aware of, and covers off on a larger spectrum of activities. Before I got into the biosecurity space, I used to know about border quarantine, and that was about all. But there's activities that go on from an Australian perspective that occur from well before people and products and pests actually get anywhere near the country. These are activities called pre-border activities, and so it's about assessing our risk, reducing the amount of pests that actually reach our border through a whole range of different ways. And this will include things like going over to our neighbouring countries and helping them reduce their pest risk so it doesn't come to us. Next to that is the at the border activities, and this is what you traditionally know of as quarantine. And I'm sure anyone coming back in from overseas into Australia has been stopped and checked for their quarantine. This happens for any goods coming in, people and products. And this is about what we can do before anything that arrives in Australia actually gets passed and on to the rest of the mainland. Now these two, the pre-border and at the border, are primarily delivered by the Australian government. That's their sort of remit. The last one on the green here is called post-border biosecurity, and this is where everyone online here today, including myself, play a really major part. And this is about all the activities that we do, whether that's at a state level for myself in Victoria, whether it's at a farm level for growers, or whether it's at a community or a property level for yourselves in the Botanic Gardens. And this is a whole range of things, anywhere from looking for the pests, for making sure that we know how to deal with them should we pick them up, having a coordinated way that we respond to them, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, and just doing everything we actually can to stop the pests doing any impact once they get here. So that's really much biosecurity in my view in a snapshot. And I thought what I'd do just to sort of help explain some of this and give some more context was, talk about some of what I'm calling operational highlights and that in plant biosecurity. So what are some of the things that we do as Australia, in particularly from my point of view as a Victorian government, but also a bit broadly in actually doing biosecurity. So the first aspect just to talk about here is plant biosecurity surveillance. Now, Daniela has talked a little bit about that's already occurring under the Botanic Gardens Biosecurity Network, and everybody who does surveillance and looks for plant pests plays a really important part in our whole network. And so it's definitely not just one person or one group of people doing things. So plant biosecurity surveillance is in essence looking for new pests that come in so that we can pick them up and deal with them. And so when we're doing the surveillance, we're either doing it for things like early detection, trying to get it when the first one or two pests come in, so we can deal with it. It could be a case of it's here and we want to know how far it's spread. We could be also doing surveillance to prove that we're free of a particular pest so that we can help our industries trade overseas. And then we also do surveillance for pest management, looking at where the hotspots for things are. And I think Louise, when she comes and talks to you in a couple of weeks, will give you a really good overview of this. Now, this is undertaken by pretty much everybody. It's not just governments who do stuff, it's not just industry. As I said, it's growers, agronomists, and the community who all work together. And there's a lot of work going on in the national space, particularly through Plant Health Australia, about how we actually bring all this information together. And it's done in a whole range of different ways. What a lot of people probably know and have seen before is these lovely puppies that you see at the airports occasionally, who are doing surveillance for products or baggages coming in and seeing if there's any fruit or products in there. That's certainly one element there. There's also a whole heap of actual specific surveillance programs. So for instance, the trap that's hanging in a tree you can see there is a fruit fly trap. Victoria, for instance, runs around about 2,000 or 3,000 fruit fly traps across the state to verify and to look for any new pests that are coming in. We also do things of once we have things have arrived, so people actually go out and look specifically at different targets, and then we'll have other programs. So Botanic Gardens Network's a great program. Victoria also runs things like Crop Safe, where our agronomists talk to each other and bring information in to make sure we understand what our pressures are. As well as surveillance, we also do investigations. So just from Victoria's perspective, we get hundreds of different investigations or reports coming into us every year. So things that may be something quite significant. And this comes through things like the Exotic Plant Pest Hotline, which we also produce. So if you see anything unusual, please ring the hotline. And through a whole range of different apps and different mechanisms. So from Victoria's point of view, we are always going out there. We generally get a lot of calls in for brown marmorated stink bug, which is the bug in the picture there, and a range of different potential pests and diseases. So that's a fire blight image in the middle one there, which impacts on apples and pears. So you'll get a whole heap of things coming in each year, and every time we get a report in, we'll follow up and ensure that there's no biosecurity risk there, and if there is, we will deal with it. Now, the picture of the cows there, I thought there just to remind me, or just to show that it's not always a very simple and as you would expect surveillance to be. So a recent investigation that we've had to have done was we detected a potential nasty virus inside the gut of a cow as we were looking at the contents of their digestive system. So we can find these pests and diseases in a whole range of different places, and we've just got to deal with it. Okay, so yeah, we follow up on that and we do there. Sometimes this turns into something quite significant in the biosecurity system. So if we find a new pest that's coming into the country, there's processes in place under the Emergency Plant Pest Response Deed, which is a national agreement between industries and governments, to respond to these significant pests to try and actually get rid of them so that we don't have to live with them day to day. There's a whole range of different ones that have been going on or are currently going on. There's just some examples that I thought I'd quickly talk about. The first one is chestnut blight. Now this is something that Victoria and Australia has been trying to eradicate for the last 10 years. It can be quite a significant undertaking. So chestnut trees are not small trees. Sometimes you get in big tractors to pull these things out and get rid of them. Sometimes it's a big approach. Sometimes it's just a much easier than pulling out trees. There's also a whole range of different pests. We've had capra beetle, which is a little beetle that eats stored product and gets into grain. That's been eradicated a number of times in Australia. Brown marmorated stink bug, BMSB, is something that was currently always coming to Australia, and we're always trying to eradicate, and we are successful in doing that so far. And chocolate banded snail is another thing that we've had in Victoria, just to show you the examples of the different types of things that we get faced with each time. And each of these are potentially significant pests. The ones with some white around there, banana freckle, citrus canker, and varroa mite, are just some examples of things that are happening outside of Victoria that as a nation we're all working towards. So just from a biosecurity sense and a system point of view, Australia is very fortunate to be free of a lot of significant pests, but we do get them introduced from time to time. But there is an agreed mechanism of which the Australian governments and the industries come together, and we eradicate successfully in a large number of cases, eradicate these pests as they come in. Now, not only from a biosecurity system do we talk about exotic pests coming in, just like to also highlight that, to me, biosecurity also talks about significant pests that are already present in Australia that we also work with minimising the impact. So from a Victorian point of view, we have a range of different pests. Some of these are things like Queensland fruit fly, how we help our industries work with those, and some things like grapevine phylloxera and potato cyst nematode. These are just pests that have come in over recent years, either freshly to Victoria or to the country. And as a part of the biosecurity system, one thing that we do is ensure that if we can't get rid of them, we try and contain them so that their impact does not go broader than where it can be limited to. And this also covers off onto things potentially when we talk about native insects that can come down time to time. So from a Victorian point of view, we get Australian plague locusts come through every several years as a plague, and it's about how do we help our growers in our community deal with that and try and stop that plague coming through. And then just to finish off, just a highlight and just a heads up again for something coming, coming in a month or two around the Urban Plant Health Network, which is coming out of Agriculture Victoria, similar to the Botanic Gardens, but it's focused more on the urban areas, and it just shows that sometimes from the government we can have a bit of fun and actually put things out. And so this is just promoting a comic book and then a colouring book that's going to be put out there to encourage everyone to be aware of some of our serious pests that we've got there. So I think I'll hand back to you now, Daniela. That's my quick overview of what plant biosecurity is in my mind in Australia.
Thanks, Stephen. I would just like to thank everyone for listening in today to our webinar. Just before we go, I would like to take a moment of your time further to participate in a quick survey. So hopefully you can all now see the survey coming up on your screen. We just have 4 quick questions that we would like you to answer. But once again, thank you very much for joining into today's webinar, and we hope that you would join us again to listen into some of the other webinar presentations that we'll be having. So just give you a moment to fill that in.